When we are thinking about ecosystems, the first thing that comes to mind is actually not necessarily soils, well, except for me, of course, but and other people related to me. But mostly what comes to mind is plants, of course, because that's the first thing that you see. And that has left kind of an imprint on the way we think of ecosystems. We think of ecosystems primarily in terms of plants first, not soil first. This is reflected in all kinds of terminology. For example, it's called plant-soil feedback, where soil is trained by plants. It's quite clear who's in the driver's seat there, and where certain ecosystem processes are clearly named with a perspective that focuses on plants. The best example of that is probably nitrogen immobilization, which simply refers to uptake of inorganic N from the soil solution in form of ammonium or nitrate into microbes. Why is that called immobilization? Because, well, then that nitrogen is not available for plants, and therefore it's called immobilized nitrogen. It's clearly a plant perspective. There's very many other terms where this is also the case, and also very many investigations are actually done with the plant and focus. Like a good example is also studies on mycorrhiza, things that we work on, for example, or pathogenic fungi. And, well, you can ask yourself, does it have to be that way? Or is there an alternative way to view the world? And, well, one thing that I've recently been thinking about is that has there actually been soil before there were plants? And, well, the evidence is not super clear, but it seems like very, very likely that what we could call soils, as the confluence of weathered minerals, organic matter, water, and life, is actually several 100 million years older than when plants first came on land. So with that perspective of a more earth geological perspective, then it's clear actually what was there first were soils. Of course, the soils were not like what they are today. We're covered up with all this green stuff. They were completely different. But nevertheless, I think it's hard to argue against them being soils. And so you could actually flip that narrative around, and you could say, well, what have soils done to maybe persist better? And so maybe they've given themselves a cover with green stuff that prevents it from being eroded and that constantly feeds it carbon, without which soil could not function. And this seems like kind of a joke, but I think that when you think more about that, it actually gives rise to a bunch of interesting questions that can also lead to new approaches in research. And those kinds of approaches to research are more related to what makes soil persist. These are things that we typically don't ask about. We usually ask about what makes this plant grow better, what aspect of a soil makes this plant grow better. But you could flip that question around and you could say, like, what aspect of a plant makes a soil function more in the long term, makes it persist, makes it, for example, resist erosion. So anyway, some food for thought. I've been thinking about this lately, and maybe you're going to read about it at some point. And with that, see you later. Bye.